Welcome back. In this video, we are going to discuss about the Azure Administrator exam, which is AZ104 exam code. And in this particular video, we are going to focus more on the compute related exam question. So in AZ104, you can expect around 55 to 60 questions in this exam. And if you are appearing the exam from non-native English speaking countries, you might get more time, but in general, it is 210 minutes to complete the Azure Administrator exam. So you have to appear for this particular exam and you will be getting Azure Administrator, which is the intermediate level certification. And there are 5 sections or 5 different areas that will be measured in the exam. And as you know, in the data center, there are 3 major main components which make up the IT infrastructure. The number one is the compute and network and storage, right? So these are the 3 core functionalities or areas where you will get around 36 exam questions out of the total 55 to 60. And there are areas like monitoring, backup, maintenance, like patching and so on, that will contribute to around 10 exam questions. So there are other 14 questions that might come from Microsoft Entra or the governance like Azure policy and so on. So from security and governance aspect, you might get around 14 questions. So in total, you're going to get 55 to 60 questions in the exam, and you will be scored against 1,000 marks in total. And if you are scoring 70% of them, you will get 700 score. If you are getting more than 700, it will be considered as a passing score, right? Let's, without any further ado, we'll get into the discussion of the questions. So before we start looking at the questions, there are certain questions which you might get around the availability set, availability zone, and so on. So we will just quickly have a brush up about our understanding or knowledge on Azure geographical presence or global presence. So when people talk about cloud, when they create application services or when they create virtual machines or containers for that matter, so behind the scene, the cloud is nothing but a data center which is remote to our location. We are connecting it through the public internet, right? So data center is made up of different servers, storage, networking devices. So you have all these stuffs put up into different racks in the data center. So the rack will have servers, the rack will have network switches on the top, which is very light in weight, and you'll have the disk storages put up at the bottom of the rack because of the heavy nature of the storage. And each rack in Azure is called as availability set. And each data center in Azure is called as availability zone. If you want to have high availability for your application, so generally we place our virtual machine into different rack or different server utilizing the concept called availability set, availability zone from Azure. Okay, so each individual rack will have independent power supply, independent network switch, independent server hardwares, and storage disk. If you're running a virtual machine on one particular rack and the other virtual machine in another rack, any problem with all these components will not impact the other virtual machine running on different server or different rack, right? So let's go and look at these concepts closely. Availability set, as I told you, it's a physical rack, and you have multiple servers put up in your physical rack. And if you want to run multiple virtual machine, by utilizing the concept called availability set, you can place your virtual machine into different rack and also different servers. So if you are selecting the number of fault domain as 1, you will get your server placed on only one rack. If you are selecting 3 fault domain, your servers will be placed across 3 different physical racks. Okay, and if you are selecting multiple update domain, your servers will be placed into, your virtual machines will be placed into different physical servers on different rack. So you can have a maximum of 20 update domain, and you can have a maximum of 3 fault domain. And if you go to the console here, you can understand this very much. So you can go and search for availability set, and you will be able to create a new availability set. So Microsoft is recommending to go with virtual machine scale set because auto scaling provides you high availability, and also it provides you a lot of additional features to balance the systems based on the requirement of your business application, like increasing and decreasing the servers. When there is increase in load and when there's decrease in load, the number of servers will get down. But then availability set is a more appropriate solution to get high availability. So if your expectation is to increase the availability of your application, then availability set would be more than sufficient. So you can have the maximum of 3 fault domain. The default fault number of fault domain is 2. The default number of update domain is 5, and you can increase it up to 20. Right. So now fault domain is nothing but each and every single rack is considered as a fault domain, because if there is a fault in any of the physical component here, it can be a disk failure or a network port failure, or it can be a server memory failure or motherboard failure. So it is going to impact only one particular fault domain. Okay, if your VMs are running on multiple different racks, it is not going to impact the virtual machines on the other rack when there is a problem with any of the physical component in rack one. So based on these options, you can go and place your virtual machines into different racks or different servers. See, if you look at things closely here, you can understand that when you're going and creating a virtual machine, or when you're going and creating a web app or container, what happens behind the scene? There is an API request that informs Azure Orchestrator to place your virtual machine on different rack or different server using the fabric controller. The fabric controller and orchestrator work hand in hand to place your virtual machine on a particular rack or a particular server. So you cannot go and place your virtual machines on a specific rack or a specific server. So fabric controller along with Azure orchestrator, it takes care of the distributed placement of your systems by having a inbuilt algorithm, right? So it is not a manual placement. So you get high availability across having your servers on different rack, different server, different storages. So availability set is going to help you logically place your systems into different physical racks and servers so that you get much availability out of the number of servers that you're having. So if you're placing your servers into different racks, different server, the correlated failures for your virtual machine will be heavily reduced, right? You will get better redundancy, better availability, better reliability of your application. So availability set is not only intended to improve the availability of your system, but it also helps you having a very good level of virtual machine to virtual machine latency, because your systems are placed in a very closer proximity, and it is connected using a very high bandwidth of network, right? So not every data center will have the opportunity to have availability zones. Availability zones are multiple different physical data centers, right? Let's go and have a look at it. So in a particular Azure physical in Azure region, you'll have multiple physical data centers. So these data centers are called as availability zone, and they have a very high connecting fiber cabling connections. So you get a millisecond of latency, just a millisecond of latency when there is a application that they want to have synchronization or replication between data center. It is having a very high speed connection. So you don't have to worry about having your servers in different data center. So even though it is in different data center, you get better replication speed, you get a very good latency, so that there is not much differences of having your servers in multiple different physical data centers. So not every region has got this benefit of having multiple data centers. If you have multiple data centers, you can have your VMs scattered across different physical data centers or availability zones, so that you get better availability. So if you're having your VMs scattered across different physical data centers or physical availability zone, you get up to 99.99 of availability. Whereas if you are placing your VMs across different racks, different availability set, you get only 99.95, which itself is a good availability SLA, but still you can better your availability by having your virtual machines scattered across different physical data center. So this is what I was conveying a minute back. So when you're placing your virtual machines on different rack, you get 99.95 service level availability. When you are having your virtual machines across different physical data centers, you get up to 99.99. But if you're placing your virtual machines across different physical regions, you get much more better SLA. So when there is a problem with the entire data center, availability set is not going to help. If you're going to have an entire region blackout, then your availability zone is not going to help. So that's where the pad region or multiple region comes into place. For example, the region 1 can be Chennai and the region 2 can be Mumbai or Pune. So it will be physically separated by hundreds of miles. Even it can be different city where Azure is planning to have their data center, like maybe Hyderabad or some new locations, right? So you need to create the virtual machines in the same resource group as the availability set, and only one virtual machine can be in one availability set. So you cannot place them into two different availability set, or you cannot have that kind of mapping. So Azure is having multiple facilities to improve the availability. So they have geographies, and then within that they have regions, within that they have availability zone, and within that they have availability set. So you can choose whichever option helps you with better availability based on the application requirement. Now let's get into the questions. Not only the compute level, even on the storage level, you can get better durability and availability if you're having multiple levels of copies of your storage across different data centers or different physical locations. So if you have applications with very high resiliency and availability requirement, then you can choose wisely which one will help you to achieve better availability and reliable service. So let's get into the first question. So you have an application named App1 that runs on two Azure virtual machine named VM1 and VM2. You plan to implement an Azure availability set for application 1. The solution must ensure that the App1 is available during planned maintenance of the hardware. Okay, so the key question, the key part of this question is they're telling us during the planned maintenance of the hardware, the solution must ensure the app is available. So even when there is a planned activity, the application 1 should not go down. So if you want to do that, so what is planned? What helps you from tolerating on planned maintenance? So if you are having your virtual machines in one update domain, so obviously both of your VMs will go down. And if you have two fault domain means you can have two different rack, that is good. And then okay, so that is fault domain is to mitigate any unplanned outages or unplanned issues. So here they are talking about planned maintenance activity. So which has to be update domain is the right answer, but here one update domain might not be sufficient. So we need at least two update domain to place our servers into VMs into two different update domains, so that if Microsoft is doing a planned maintenance activity on one of the hardware, your other VM will be available. So that way your app will still be available. So the other answers cannot help you. So one fault domain is going to have both of your virtual machine in the same rack. And here the question is about planned maintenance. So answer should be update domain. Update domain is what is going to help you tolerating the failure when there is a planned maintenance activity by Microsoft on their server hardware. So let's move on to the next question. You plan to move a distributed on-premises application named App1 to an Azure subscription. After the planned move, App1 will be hosted on several Azure virtual machines. You need to ensure that App1 always runs on at least 8 virtual machine during the planned maintenance activity. So they are asking us our application 1 should be running on at least 8 VM. So which means we need to have very lot of update domains created, and they are talking about during planned Azure maintenance. So this is the keyword. So you cannot mitigate this with fault domains. You cannot mitigate it with auto scaling. You cannot mitigate it with yeah, auto scaling is not the right thing. So here we can have 10 update domains. So that way, if you're having 10 update domains and 10 virtual machine, even if there is one update domain which is getting impacted, you can have at least 8 virtual machine running. So answer is C. This is a very straightforward question. You plan to deploy 3 Azure virtual machines named VM1, VM2, and VM3. The virtual machines will host a web app named App1. You need to ensure that at least 2 virtual machines are available if a single Azure data center becomes unavailable. So here they are talking about Azure data center. They are talking about availability zone, not availability set. So data center is availability zone. What should you deploy? So set is not a right answer. Set is not a right answer. So there should be a right answer in one of these, availability zone and availability zone. If you want to have two virtual machines and if there is a single data center failure and if you have both of them in the single availability zone, then all the three virtual machine will get impacted. So each virtual machine should have to be placed in a separate availability zone. So that way, if there is a impact with your single data center, your application will still be running. So answer is C. Each VM should have to be placed in a separate availability zone. You are deploying a virtual machine by using an availability set in the East US Azure region. You have deployed 18 virtual machine in 2 fault domain and 10 update domain. Very nice. So you have got 18 virtual machines in 2 fault domain and 10 update domain. So you have got 10 update domain and you have got 18 virtual machines. So which means you can have 2 virtual machines in each of your update domain, right? So you can have one update domain having 2 virtual machines each. So 2 VMs each, right? So that way, so what they are telling us, Microsoft is performing a planned physical maintenance activity. So there are chances that one update domain can go down is what they are saying. What is the maximum number of virtual machines that will be unavailable? So it will be 2 VMs that will be unavailable if there is a planned maintenance activity on one of this update domain, because each update domain is going to have at least 2 virtual machine or on an average 2 VM. So answer is 2. This is a straightforward question and we can answer it easily. So you have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains the resources in the following table. VNet is in RG1, VNet 2 is in RG2. There is no connectivity between VNet 1 and VNet 2. Okay, so that is interesting. So the question says there is no connectivity. So you cannot move the VM or you cannot do any online migration kind of stuffs. Okay, an administrator named admin1 creates an Azure virtual machine named VM1 in RG1. VM1 uses a disk named disk1, okay, and it connects to virtual network 1. Perfect. Admin1 then installs a custom application in VM1. Okay, so he needs to move the custom application to VNet 2. Okay, so there is no network connectivity. There is no connectivity between VNet 1 and VNet 2. So they are asking us to minimize the administrative effort. And that is another important key point here. And which two actions should you perform to answer? Select the appropriate options in the answer area. Create a network interface in RG2. Okay, what it is going to help? Creating a network interface is not going to do any help. Detaching the network interface is not going to help. Here we are talking about the disk and the custom application that we have loaded in that particular disk. Delete VM1. Okay, let's see if that can help. See, when you are deleting the VM1, you should not delete the disk one. That is the very important message that you need to be um, aware of. So let me delete the VM1, but you have to keep the disk one because the custom application is installed on that particular VM1. Move a network interface to RG2. Okay, that is also not going to help. And attach a network interface. No. Create a network interface. No. Move VM1 to RG2. No. See, you don't have connectivity, so you cannot just like that use resource mover to move it. Create a new virtual machine using the existing disk. So that way you can get the complete application up and running on a new virtual network. Create a new VM on the VNet 2 using the disk 1. So because you have not deleted the disk, so disk will be still available. So that will be the right answer. So in this particular case, creating a new VM is the right answer. In the drop down, you have to choose create a new virtual machine. And in this one, you have to select delete the VM1, but do not delete the disk one so that you have the disk to recreate the VM. Okay, it's kind of a tricky question, but that's the answer. You have an Azure subscription named subscription 1 that contains the resources shown in the following table. VM1 connects to a virtual network named VNet 2. Okay, interesting. Using a network interface named NIC1. Okay. You need to create a new network interface named NIC2 for VM1. Okay. So see, in general, this is the key message. Okay, so the virtual machine where you want to attach the network interface, the network interface has to be in the same region, same location. Okay, so then that means the VM is in which region? That is where we need to be careful about. VM1 is currently in West US. So if you are able to create the network card in West US, so that way you will be able to attach that particular thing to VM1. So if you're creating a NIC1 in Central US, so it is not going to help. So the answer is not going to help. This is no. Create a NIC card in RG2 and West US. Okay, yeah, West US. If you're creating it in West US, yeah, you will be able to attach it to VM1. Yeah, so you can also do this. See, resource group is just a logical grouping. So resource group and the VM can be in different location. The resource group and the network can be in different location. So only thing is important, the network card has to be created in the same region. So that is the reason we are choosing West US as the option. So it can be in RG2 or resource group 1 or resource group. It is immaterial. And you cannot create the network card in central US, and you cannot attach that to a different region. So that is not at all possible. So in the exam, so you need to be aware of one thing. So these are all a group of questions. So you will be given the scenario, and then you will be given multiple tabs, and then I think you cannot go back and review these kind of yes or no questions. So you have to answer it, and there is no negative marking. So answer all the questions. Okay. So now I don't know. There is some okay. So you have an Azure subscription that contains the resources shown in the following table. VM1 connects to virtual network 1. Okay, VM1 connects to virtual network 1. Okay, you need to connect VM1 to VNet 2. Okay, so they are asking us to connect the VM to East Asia. Currently, it is in West US. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I don't think there is a, I mean, they're asking us to go and connect it to a different network, right? So I think you move the VM1 to RG2. That is not going to help because resource group moving the VM to a different resource group does not get us attached to a different network. That is not the right answer. This is no. Okay, let's see. You turn off VM1 and then you add a new network interface to VM1. No, that is not going to help because the network interface has to come from East Asia. You create a new network interface and then you attach the new network interface to VM1. So they have not clearly mentioned that creating a network interface in East Asia, and that is not also not going to help. So definitely we need to create the VM1, and you have to create it and connect it to virtual network too. So that is the only way you can have this exercise done. Okay, moving on to the next question. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1. VM1 was deployed by using a custom Azure resource template named ARM1. So they are using ARM template to deploy it. You receive a notification that VM1 will be affected by maintenance. Okay, so they are doing a planned maintenance, and your VM might go down because of the planned maintenance. So they are asking us, you need to move the VM1 to a different Azure host immediately, to a different Azure physical server. So if you're using the option redeploy, this is going to help us to move the VM to a different Azure host. So if you are moving the VM to a different subscription, no, it is not going to move to a different hardware. From the update management, click enable. No, this is also not going to help. So the right answer is you have to click on redeploy. This is like a vMotion in your VMware environment or live migration in your Hyper-V. So redeploying will move your VM to a different Azure host. So that is the stem of the question. You need to deploy an Azure VM scale set, which is auto scaling, that contains 5 instances as quickly as possible. So auto scaling is nothing but scale set VM, and you can use the scale set VM orchestration mode. That is what they were also conveying here, right? If you are If you want to have high availability and widest range of features and multiple VMs, then go with virtual machine scale set orchestration mode. So this is the right answer. Okay, straightforward. So you cannot have availability zone, that, this, and all. So scale set VM orchestration mode is the best option here. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that runs Windows Server 2019. You save VM1 as a template, name template1. So when you're taking a template of the existing virtual machine, so you will get your what do you call the OAS, the instance type, the instance size, all those things part of your template. So they are asking us, you plan to deploy a virtual machine named VM2 from the template1 using the template1. What can you configure during the deployment of VM2? Okay, so the operating system, it will remain the same as part of the template. If you are having a template with Windows 2019, so the template will also have the 2019 operating system. You cannot change that. So administrator username, yeah, you can change it. Virtual machine size, no, you cannot change it. You can, the template will have whatever, after recreation, you can just power it off and increase it. But from the template, it will remain the same. And you can actually change the resource group name. But I think administrator username is the best option out of this question. Okay, so you have an Azure subscription named subscription one. You deploy a Linux virtual machine named VM1 to subscription one. You need to monitor the metrics and logs of VM1. Recently, like last to last class, we were discussing about how to monitor, how to get the events, metrics, and logs from the VM, right? How we need to have the Azure Performance Diagnostics extension that will bring all the performance related information, metrics, and logs from the VM1. You plan to deploy several Azure virtual machines that will run Windows Server 2019 in a VM virtual machine scale set, so auto scaling. So what they're asking us to do is you need to ensure that Nginx is available on all the VMs. They want to install this as part of the bootstrapping, or they want to add this as a utility on all the VMs that is getting created. So AD application proxy, no, this is not the way to do that. Azure Application Insight is a monitoring dashboard or insight you get out of it. And Azure custom script extension. You remember when we were seeing the Azure VM session, we were using this custom script extension to install any tools or additional application or additional maybe, like I think I showed you a demo on how to use a PowerShell script to install IAS. Similarly, you can use any script to install Nginx as part of the custom script extension. So this is the right answer. Pretty straightforward. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that runs Windows Server 2019. The VM was deployed using default drive settings. Okay, so they are going with the default drive layout is what they are saying. You sign into VM1 as a user named user1 and perform the following action. Create some files on drive C, create some files on drive D. Drive D is nothing but a temporary ephemeral drive, and modify the screensaver timeout. Okay, change the desktop background. Okay, background. You plan to redeploy the VM1. Okay, when you are doing a redeployment, they're asking us which changes will be lost. So this is the stem of the question. When you're redeploying it, when you're moving the virtual machine from one Azure hardware to another hardware, the content on the drive D, this is the ephemeral drive. So this content will get lost when you're moving the virtual machine from one hardware to another hardware. So generally the drive D is the local drive that you get from the local physical server disk, and that is where you store the ephemeral or the temporary caching or the temporary content or the page file virtual memories and so on. So generally like the content stored here as temporary or caching kind of, so you should not store any business critical or permanent information here. So the other ones, it will get retained. The new files on the drive C will be there, screensaver will be there, desktop background will be there, because these are all part of your C drive program configuration. The answer is C. The new files on drive D will be lost if you're moving the VM from one server hardware to another. Next question. You have an Azure virtual machine that has a single data disk. Okay, you have been tasked with attaching this data disk to another VM. You need to make sure that your strategy allows for the virtual machines to be offline for the least amount of time possible. Which of the following is action you should take first? First is the question. This is the stem. They're asking us, there might be multiple steps, but what is the first step? See, if they are not clearly, they are not mentioned, it is a shared disk. It is just a single data disk is not they have mentioned. Azure has got a feature called Azure shared disk that can be attached to multiple VMs. But if it is a normal disk, so you have to detach the data disk from the current VM, and then only you can attach it to the other server. So the very first step is detaching the data disk. So that is the question here. First, what is the first step you do? Next question, your company has an Azure subscription. You need to deploy a number of Azure virtual machine using Azure ARM template. You have been informed that the VMs will be included in a single availability set. Okay, they are saying it is only single availability set. Okay, fine. You are required to make sure that the ARM template you configure allows for as many VMs possible to remain accessible in the event of a fabric failure. So if there is a fabric failure or maintenance activity, they want to have the maximum number of VMs that can be available. So what is the value that you need to configure for flat platform fault domain count? So fault domain count. So we should achieve maximum value here. Okay, so whatever the maximum number that can be achieved, you can configure that. So that way you can have as many number of VM. So answer is D. Okay, so with that, I think we are done with the first set of questions, part of compute part one. So we will stay in touch and we will connect back on